The first part of section 4 of chapter 6 is using inverse functions. In order to know how to use them, you've got to know what they are. An inverse relation interchanges the input and output values. So what that means for you is when you're looking at a graph, the inverse function is going to reflect whatever you've got, whether their shape or points. It's going to reflect it over this line where x equals y. All right. So in that case, the points that I have plotted here. So the inverse of 2, 6 is going to be 6, 2. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2. And you'll see that that reflects it. If I were to fold this graph along this line, that ends up right here at 6, 2. The inverse of negative 2, 4 is going to be 4, negative 2. And you can see that if you were to fold that, this point would match up with this one. All right. And negative 4, negative 1, the inverse is going to be flip that and make it negative 1, negative 4. So that's going to put it right here, 1, 2, 3, 4, which is a reflection of this point around this line, x equals y. So what that means is that we're simply going to trade the x and the y. So for the problem that says give the inverse function of y equals 4x plus 2, there's simply 2 steps. First, you're going to exchange the x and the y, and then you're simply going to solve for your new y. So it really is that simple, I promise. So you're just going to, your inverse function is going to be the opposite. So it's going to be x equals 4y plus 2. And now you solve for the new y. So subtract 2 from both sides. So x minus 2 equals 4y. So divide by 4. And so then, just for the sake of making it look like what we know it's supposed to look like, y is going to equal 1/4 x minus 1/2. Because remember, if we divide this binomial, you have to divide both parts. So here is our inverse function. And what we would write it as f negative 1 of x, and that reads f inverse. F inverse of x is how you would read this. So this is f inverse of x is, so f inverse of x equals 1/4 x minus 1/2. And that really and truly is all you do on the whole first section. Simply swap the x and y, solve for y. There's your inverse function. Easy. So then the next thing that you're going to need to do is verify that the function is, in fact, an inverse function. And if you'll remember, inverses of multiplying, if you multiply 2 inverses, you got back to 1. Additive inverses get you to 0. Well, inverse functions get you back to x. So if you take a function of the inverse and get x, and then try it again and take the inverse of the function of x and get x, then you know that you've done it right and you've got an inverse function. So let's do these. So we're going to take, let's call this one f of x, and we'll call the new one g of x. Okay? So we're going to have g of f of x. So f of x is, and we learned how to do this just yesterday, so 4x plus 2. So we want g of x. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take 1/4 x, and remember we're going to plug in the whole x. We want g of this whole x. So 1/4 4x plus 2 minus 1/2. Follow what I'm doing? So I chose f of x is that first function, and I put it in for f of x, and now I'm taking g, or the inverse function, and I'm plugging in this whole 4x plus 2 where the x was. And now simply work it out. So 1/4 times 4 is 1, so that's x, plus 2 times 1/4 is 1/2, minus 1/2, x plus 1/2 minus 1/2 is x, which is what I want it to equal. So I'm halfway there. So now I want f of g of x. So g of x is this one, 1/4 x minus 1/2. So I want f of this. So f is up there. 4 times x. X is the 1/4 x minus 1/2 plus 2. So 4 times 1/4 is just 1, so we have 1x. Minus 4 times 1/2 is 2. 4 minus 2, or 4, x minus 2 plus 2 is x. So if I got x on both equations, both times that I worked it out, then yes, this function is inverse. And we knew that it was because we worked it. So if you get anything other than x either direction, no, those were not inverse functions of each other. All right? So one more thing and then we're done for today. Oh my word, this is a quick one. Here we go. So how does this work in the real world? What we're doing with this, it's almost like it really just kind of like solving for a certain thing. I mean, this really is some things that we've done before. We're just calling it different. And that's a lot of what math is. It's just once you've learned it, you know it, and now you can do different things with it. So in this case, we've got a greeting card company, and they use this function to show their cost of producing n greeting cards. So of course, when you produce cards, you've got a cost involved. You've got to buy the ink, you've got to buy the cardstock, you've got to buy the envelopes, you've got to pay the workers, you've got to run the factory, you've got electricity. All of these things are involved in their cost. And they have figured out that their cost is $360 plus 60 cents per card. Per card. So the N is the number of cards. So what we want to do is this. And I know some of you are going to say, why did we go to all that work? I could have just, it's okay. Hang in there. So step one is to find the inverse. Now, with word problems, you can't change what you call them. So the X and the Y, you can't change. Cost doesn't become number of cards, and number of cards doesn't become cost. You have to leave them the same variable. But what you're doing is you're simply, the inverse is going to be solve for the N. All right, this becomes your, instead of, this is your input and your output, make this your input and this your output. So we're going to start with C equals 360 plus 60 cents N. We're going to solve for the N and just get it by itself. So subtract 360. So the cost minus 360 equals 60 cents N. Divide by the 60 cents. And so now N equals C divided by, let's see, I think I did it already. Let's look and make sure. So what you'll do is you'll take 1 divided by 0.6, or actually, let's see, we can just take C over 60 cents, it looks like. Is that what I did? Oh my goodness. And that's minus 360 divided by 0.6 is 600. So this is your inverse equation. So the number of cards equals the cost divided by 60 cents minus 600. So there's your inverse. So that's step one. Step two, it says, tell me the number of cards that they produced when the cost for that month or year or whatever is $615. Probably a week, huh? All right. So all you do in that case is your cost is 615. Now you've got your equation all set up. All you need to do is plug in 615 divided by 60 cents minus 600. And I did that on my handy dandy calculator earlier. 615 divided by 60 cents is 1,025 minus 600 gives you 425 cards because N is the cards. So when our cost is $615, we have produced 425 cards. So there's the second part of your answer. Easy day. Enjoy. It won't be the same always.